Making sure you start your black and white photo edit the right way is fundamental to your success. So in this video, I'll walk you through several black and white conversion techniques so that you can choose the one that is right for your photo editing. And the way that most people have been told to start their black and white conversion is probably the worst way you can go about it. Right, let's get into it. So one of the worst mistakes you can make is just coming in and desaturating your photo, i.e. removing any saturation from the colors. The reason this is a really bad approach is because we've got no control over the values in the photo. And after all, a black and white photo is purely made up of tonal values. That's all we've got to play with. So I would not recommend this approach. However, if you are starting from a point of desaturation, one way we can actually improve that is to work with things like the contrast slider, work with our highlights and shadow recovery to make sure that we're maintaining detail in the black and white. And of course, we do have access to the curves so that we can force in a bit more contrast into the photo. But one of the big issues I've got here is if we look down here on the sand, you can see that we have the water going onto the sand. I would love to see some differentiation in our black and white between these two colors. However, we don't really see that. The value is very similar in that area, particularly over here on the right hand side. They're basically the same tones. So what can we do about that? Well, we can move on to what most people get told is the right way to do a black and white conversion. And that is with the convert to black and white tool. Now I'm using Luminar Neo, but you have a very similar tool in most other photo editors. The benefit of this tool is that we can actually dial in the brightness value of certain colors. So if we wanted to bring in more contrast to the sky or lighten it up, we can do that by grabbing the blue slider. So this approach definitely gives us some advantages over just straightforward desaturation. However, there are also some issues as well, but I'm going to show you how to fix them. Let's just reset this again and we'll look at some of the issues that we have going on. I want to actually darken down the foreground, so that is the yellow in the sand. However, when I converted that to black and white and I pulled down the yellow there, look what happens over here in the landmass. Basically, the greens and the yellows that exist in there, that gives us a bit of contrast, which is what we would want when we're working with a black and white conversion. However, if I darken down the sand by dropping down this yellow slider here, we're losing all of that contrast right there. So while we win in one area of the photo, we lose in another. And the same can be said for the blues as well. If I grab the blue slider because I want to add more contrast to the sky, that's great. However, as I drop the blues down, I lose the differentiation in the sand that we looked at before. Whereas if I boost the blues up and drop the yellows, maybe even the reds as well, because the sand's kind of orangey, made of the yellow and the red channel, we can actually carve out a nice differentiation in the sand here, but at the expense of all of that lovely detail that we brought into the sky. So to solve that, let me introduce you to my zonal conversion method. I think you'll like it. All right, let's just double click the red, yellow, and the blue sliders to reset everything. So this is similar to the desaturation that we saw before, but now we've got that extra control. What I'm going to do is just darken down the blues, maybe the cyan as well, and my focus here is purely in the sky. So here's our before, here's our after, just looking at the sky. I think that's about as good as we can get with this particular technique. So now what I'm going to do is use my masking and just mask that into the sky. I could just draw a gradient over this section here. That's one way to mask that in. Alternatively, we could of course come into Mask AI and just select the sky that way. Okay, let's jump out of this. We've done a conversion on the sky only. Now let's focus on a new zone. Let's concentrate on this area over here, and we're going to close that tool down. Now when we open it, we have a brand new instance of the tool. We can do a brand new black and white conversion. And this time we can come in and we can work with the yellow slider, which is going to introduce a bit more contrast into this landmass here. The greens, we can boost those as well. Although sometimes people are surprised to see that where you think is actually green foliage, it's more affected by the yellow slider than it is with the green slider. But that's just something to bear in mind. Now, let's just mask this in only over this area. So this time I'm going to use a different masking method. I'm going to use the Object Select AI. We can just click over that area, add the tree as well. And I'm just going to remove with the erase version of the brush any of that effect from over the sea. All right, now let's just darken down the sand as we wanted to before. So again, we're going to open up a brand new black and white adjustment, convert to black and white, grab the yellow, and this time, rather than going up like we did to bring in detail over here, this time we can now bring it down and actually start to get that separation between the sand and where the sea meets it just here. So I like what's going on down here in the foreground, but I don't like what's going on with the sea. I want to keep a rich darkness and a separation between the sky and the sea. And so because of that, I'm going to come in with my erase tool, reduce the size so that it kind of fits over the sea a bit better. And I'm just going to remove it from the sea right there. And I want to make sure that I just include this little area along here because that was where we were actually able to establish a tonal separation between the dry sand and that little bit of reflective sand right there. And now as a final step, we're just going to darken down the sea with the black and white conversion. Again, brand new instance of the tool. We can grab the cyan slider, bring that down, and again, we can bring the blue slider down as well. And so we can see a comparison between the two. What I'm going to do is just duplicate this layer, throw away the edits that we just went through with those black and white conversions, and I'll just do a quick desaturation on this so we can see the difference. So I'll open the develop tool, come down to the color section and just desaturate. So I've just pulled out all the color. And so if I hide this layer, we'll see the conversion that we did underneath that actually incorporated, sorry, it helps if I choose the right layer, that actually incorporated all of these black and white conversions that were done with a zonal approach. So I'll show the layer that is just a standard black and white desaturation. You can see that there really isn't much information there. There's no real contrast or detail. And here you can see the black and white zonal conversion worked so much better. Before we get into the next conversion technique, I just wanted to mention to those of you looking at getting hold of Luminar Neo, it is currently on sale. I've got a link in the description below along with a coupon code as well. So it'll save you a bit of money. I also get a small commission from that, and that just helps me keep creating this free content to try and help improve photo editing here on YouTube. Right, let's carry on. So let's duplicate this layer one more time. I'm going to come over to the edit stack and just reset everything. So I'll throw away that develop tool where we desaturated it. And now I'm going to come down, and this time I'm going to jump into the creative section right here, and I'm going to apply the dramatic tool. Now bear with me because this is well worth having a play around with and learning this. So here's our before and here's our after with 100% of this tool applied. So obviously straight out of the box, this doesn't really help us. What do we need to do? Well, the first thing you want to do to have a black and white version is to desaturate the photo. Now this desaturation is different to what I showed you before because we're also combining contrast via the tool's local contrast slider. You can just bring the local contrast slider all the way down, whereas if you want to bring in more detail through your whole photo, we can do that by boosting the local contrast slider up. And of course, we can sit this anywhere in between so that we can get a nice conversion with a nice level of contrast straight out of the gate. Just want to say, if you're interested in black and white photo editing, I'm currently putting together a brand new course dedicated to getting the most out of black and white photo editing. If you would like to be the first to be notified when this course is complete, potentially a pre-sale discount, I've got a link in the description where you can go fill out your details and you will be the first to be notified about the course. Now, one other quirk with this tool is that by default, the brightness value is set to +30. So if we want to keep the brightness of our values consistent to what we saw originally, we just drop that to 0. And now you can see that we've got a nice conversion and it's got a lovely level of contrast and detail added into this conversion. Personally, I think this is a much better starting point for our black and white photos. But there's one more conversion method I want to show you. This time in the creative section, I'm going to skip right past dramatic and open the mood tool. Now, as you may be aware, this applies a creative lookup table so that we can do a really nice color grade. However, what I'm going to do this time is actually just borrow the contrast value of the lookup table. So I'm going to put my amount to 100. Now I've got the ability to work with the contrast. And here's another key. We can desaturate the photo. So first of all, you're going to think, well, we've created a kind of sepia photo. I want black and white. Well, don't worry about that because this is a kind of two-step process. All we want to do initially is just set the contrast level where we want it. Look at our before and our after. And now all we do is just apply a desaturation over the top of that because we've already created our contrast in our conversion. And that is a lovely, quick way to convert to black and white. I'm going to put those different conversions up on screen now so that we can do a quick comparison. So we started with an original long exposure color version, and the only thing I did before I started my processing, which I didn't mention, was just to boost the saturation slightly. And the reason I do that is so that when we're converting to black and white and changing the luminance value of the colors, we actually have some color to grab onto. But the first approach some beginners make is just to desaturate the photo, which just removes all color from the photo, but it doesn't give us any specific control over the brightness values. And that's where the next version comes in, which is to convert to black and white and then control the luminance, i.e. the brightness of the specific colors in the photo. This already looks way better than just the desaturated version. However, the problem is any changes we make to the brightness of a certain color affects the whole photo. So I wanted to darken down the sand, but that also darkened down and removed any contrast from the landmass. That's where this technique for the zonal black and white conversion comes in, and we can get a much more refined result. We use the same principles of adjusting the brightness values in the photo based on the color that they were originally. However, we did it in several masked passes so that we could get the best individualized result for each zone in the photo. If that just seems a little too time consuming, we have a couple of other options. We can use the dramatic tool to create a very nice punchy black and white conversion. It certainly doesn't compete with the zonal version that we had full control over, but the dramatic version certainly beats the desaturated version. Then beyond the dramatic conversion, Luminar Neo also gives us another option, which is to use lookup tables, which are found within the mood tool, to add contrast to our photo, and then we desaturate that result. So if we quickly work through these, we start with the original. This is the desaturated version. This is a more traditional black and white conversion, changing the luminance of the colors. This is our zonal approach to that same technique, a big advancement in my opinion. Then we have the dramatic tool conversion, and we also have a lookup table version as well. Have a look at all 5 of those options, and please let me know in the comments which version do you prefer and which method do you think would be appropriate for your black and white editing. I'd love to know. And who knows, maybe you've got another way that you feel is better than what I've shared here, and I would love to hear from you if that's the case. If you'd like to see how I took this photo from our initial black and white conversion through to a more advanced fine art edit, where I'm using some of my favorite black and white editing techniques, then you're going to want to watch the video that's appearing up on screen right now. I really look forward to seeing you in that one. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to learn a whole heap along the way.